So now I kind of want to bring attention to something very disturbing, a very, very disturbing story coming out of China. And these are the way the Chinese government is using authoritarian tactics to lock down entire cities due to a COVID outbreak that's happening in China, and specifically in Shanghai. And to really understand where the Chinese government is coming from, you need to understand that China has adopted a zero COVID policy, which means that if they see an outbreak coming out of the country, in a region, in a city, they immediately take harsh restrictions, whether it's lockdowns, whether it's mass testing, to ensure that outbreak doesn't spread wider into the country. And that's meant that it has paralyzed certain cities, because when you take these drastic measures to test people and even lock down, you end up paralyzing society. And case in point, recently, the government officials in the city of Guangzhou conducted COVID tests on over 18 million residents. For what? For what was the reason? It was because they had detected 2 cases in the city, only 2 cases, and that prompted over 18 million residents to be tested, a massive testing campaign. And it's a massively, massively disruptive policy that paralyzes life in Chinese cities. And that is exactly what is happening in Shanghai, to the point that residents aren't being allowed to leave their homes, not even to get food, not even to get like essential needs. Instead, they're relying on volunteers and government workers to take out those deliveries. So basically, they write up a list, right? Every compound, every apartment writes up a list of what they need, and they give it to these volunteers, and they bring it to them. But the thing is that they don't have enough people to do so, because there's so many residents in the city that they can't keep up with the demand. And delivery services are struggling to meet those needs of the people, and government officials are as well. And so much so that it's leading to a food crisis where a lot of them are starving. And it's really heartbreaking what's going on, because they're under this repressive authoritarian rule, and they can't really do much. They can't go out. They can't go out to protest or demand a different policy. They're stuck here until the government says, all right, we're over with the lockdown, you guys can go out. And I want to show you guys this video that was taken in Shanghai, from a high-rise in Shanghai, where people are literally wailing and screaming at the conditions that they are being put through, because they're starving, they aren't allowed to go out, and it's chilling to the bone. So let me pull up that video real quick.
这个是整个人在叫啊，完了总有200人，所有人都在叫，要命了！就刚刚5分钟前头，俺叫还没几个了，现在突然之间，所有人都叫了，要死！
So based on this video, you can see that people are on the brink of revolting against this policy. And in this Twitter thread, the same Twitter thread, Eric Ding translates what the narrator was saying. You can kind of hear him saying a little bit as he's recording that video. And basically, he says that to the effect, and excuse my language, the narrator implies that shit is about to hit the fan soon if this continues. And what complicates this even more is that the Chinese population relies a lot on fresh food instead of processed and frozen food. So, on top of not being able to deliver these foods on time, the foods that they're asking for aren't frozen; they're fresh. So, by the time that they actually get to those apartments, to the people, the food has already been spoiled. The food doesn't work anymore, and of course you can't eat that, so it exacerbates that problem. And if you think that sounds bad, at a certain point during this lockdown, they were literally separating children from their parents. COVID positive kids were being separated from their parents to mitigate spread, and it's ridiculous, and it's heartbreaking what's happening to the people in Shanghai. And a lot of this a lot of these extreme tactics stem from the fact that, China has a very elderly population, and a lot of them aren't vaccinated. And if they are vaccinated, the vaccines that they have gotten aren't effective. They're vaccines that were made by Chinese pharmaceutical companies, and those aren't, frankly, as effective as the ones that have been produced by Pfizer or Moderna. And so the government knows that if they were to allow this virus to spread with no lockdown, it would result in massive amounts of death, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions. And so this is why they're doubling down on their COVID-0 policy, which, it's hurting people, and it's because of their own irresponsibility to, promote vaccination. And a lot of this low rate of vaccination comes from the fact that elderly people in China kind of trusted the government, trusted this zero COVID policy, in which they believe that we'll be safe, we'll be able to contain this virus through these policies, through these hard lockdown policies, and we don't need a vaccine. So that's another reason why they didn't vaccinate themselves. But again, on top of that, I mean, the Chinese government hasn't done a good job at making sure that they're vaccinated, and now they have a full-blown crisis on their hands because with Omicron, this zero COVID policy just isn't going to work because Omicron spreads way faster than any other variant, than Delta, than any other variants that we've seen in the past few years. And so people are revolting. They're expressing their dismay at this policy, and it's even, you can kind of tell how bad it is by the way that Chinese media is reporting on it. Chinese media is obviously very tightly controlled by the state, by the government. And it's very interesting that, while I was doing some research on this topic, the South China Morning Post, they were talking about the Shanghai lockdowns. And the way they describe it is very, very interesting. They said that the South China Morning Post said Shanghai will relax some of its most draconian lockdown restrictions. So that's the key word, draconian. Like, the fact that a Chinese outlet is using those kind of words towards this policy kind of shows like a little fissure, a little breakaway from what the government is doing, and shows that things might not be as stable as the Chinese government might want us to believe. And this, of course, has wider implications for the globe as a whole, because we rely on China for so much of our supply chain, and Shanghai is a major city of where things and goods are exported. And so this could ultimately mean higher prices abroad. The same thing that happened during the pandemic in 2020, where everything shut down and things weren't able to get out of ports. And then once we reopened, it caused a spike in demand, and it caused, as a result, a spike in prices. The same thing is happening here. Mike Wackett at the Lodestar explains that shipping rates in that area are decreasing because carriers are scrambling to find cargo from shutter manufacturing. They're lowering their prices because they want to get cargo out of these ports and get them where they need to be. But of course, that's not happening because truck drivers in Shanghai are afraid to make that drive, are afraid to transport the goods that are made in the factories to these ports. And as a result, what that ends up is that it builds up products in these ports that are just waiting to be exported. So now imagine, once they reopen, these rates will spike again because of that high demand. There's going to be a high demand to get these goods out of those ports. But the bad thing is that these containers, these ships, don't have enough supplies to actually get that material out now. In China, the report says that they didn't leave enough material containers to actually meet the demand once things reopen. So that means higher prices for these containers, and higher prices for the average consumer around the world. And I think this Quartz article kind of summarizes it pretty well. They say that a rush of goods will need to be shipped once the cities reopen, and there won't be enough containers in China's ports to pack them all into, and prices will go up, once again disrupting a supply chain that had barely begun to recover from the pandemic's chaos. So again, disruptions upon disruptions, and it's going to lead to higher prices here at home.